So this is a continuation of what I was just doing with the rose. So now I'm just taking this very delicate strip and I'm curving it around. I'm kind of like pinching this underside together. And you know, there's more details you could get into here. If you really look at a real rose, you can make it look pretty realistic. Just depends on what you're going for. There's so much potential here too for pulling and breaking of glaze. There's so much potential for that. So if you really wanted this to look more like a real rose, you could get in there and like divide up these petals and maybe curve them around. You can kind of see like I'm cutting into them and I'm making these petals a little bit more individual, especially on the outer ring of petals, and I'm rounding off the edge here. And then I might, you know, curve them around and give them a little bit more volume. I could work on this forever, but I'm going to move on because I want to show you the rest of the things on the heart. So that would be kind of how I would make sort of a rose. I would continue to work on that until it got it to where I wanted it. Now here's the trick, guys, is that now all of a sudden I have about an inch of solid clay right here in the center of the rose. So you might want to take a tool, like a loop tool that I gave you. This is a smaller one, and I'm going to see how thick that is, and I'm going to kind of go in and I'm just going to twist that loop tool, which pulls clay out. So I'm in a sense kind of hollowing out the inside of this rose. It doesn't need to be solid clay. And when you do this, remember there's another trick here. You have to poke a hole in that hollow space. If you attach this to your piece, all of a sudden you have a little bubble of trapped air there, which will explode if you don't poke a hole. So these are all things that you need to remember as you're building and attaching pieces to your sculpture. Okay, so now I'm scoring this up and I'm going to attach it somewhere on my piece. So I have to think about this because I'm actually incorporating a rose right now into my theme here, which it wasn't originally part of it, but I'm going to make it part of it for the purpose of this demo. Let me see how I could do that. The Vena Morris is the vein that runs. So roses are the romantic flower that you would give someone if you were courting them. So maybe I could say there's a courtship happening here. Maybe you guys, okay, check this out. Maybe the rose is the wedding ring. Maybe it's the diamond. It's huge. I don't know how I'm going to do this here. It would go right here if I were to add it. All right, hang on a sec. This is my left hand. I want to make sure I'm putting it on. Nope, it would go right here. This is the ring finger, which is already has a ventricle on it. So if I were to do that, I'd have to attach it. I'd have to maybe remove the ventricle and attach it. I think that's what I'm going to do. So this is another thing that's kind of cool about having your pieces be leather hard but still wet, is that you can remove things. See how easily I cut that off? And then I'm just going to score it. And not score it, but scrape that extra clay off. See how that flakes off right there? That is the perfect carving state where your piece is still wet, but you can carve into it and that clay just kind of flakes right off. Okay, and then I'm going to use this rose as my diamond. This is sort of the wedding diamond here. So your wedding ring doesn't have to be a diamond, it could be anything. Alright, so I scored both and now I'm just gonna sort of attach it. And because this is such a tight spot in here, I want to use a wooden tool. I'm going to go in and use that to scrape and attach. And then eventually I'm going to go in and really kind of clean this up because this is super messy in here. And I want it to look clean. So much of working on your clay pieces is carving and cleaning up, especially transitions between things. The transition between the attached rose and the finger should be carved and cleaned up so that it looks realistic. You know, there's lots of ways of working with clay. You don't always have to go for realism. But for this project, I think we're dealing with sort of a surrealist topic. The heart as a theme, right, is pretty surreal. So it's probably a good idea to stick to realism instead of abstract, sort of focus on like the nature of clay. Okay, and I think what I might do is maybe even clean this up a little bit right now, just because I'm in there. Get rid of some of that bulky extra attached clay that I don't need. So this goes for anything you're attaching. It could be a rose, it could be, you know, an extra piece. A lot of you were talking about like gauze and band-aids and things like that. So this is just how you attach really anything to your piece. And then I think I'll might even go in there with a paintbrush and kind of smooth this out in there. Just get rid of those carving marks. Alright, I only have a few more minutes before I'm switching to ceramics 2. So I'm going to show you a few more things that I think some of you were curious about. By the way, I'm having so much fun working on these things with you guys. This is the best part of my day right here. Okay, so now I have a big rose as the wedding band, or the wedding diamond, which is cool. Eventually I'm going to have to put a band around the finger here. So to carve, let me see, what can I do in the next 5 minutes that can help you guys move forward with your piece? I will do carving next demo because we're not there yet. You guys you're definitely still adding clay. So how do we add veins to our piece? Let me add some more veins. We talked about adding chambers the other day. We did that. We added some veins back here. What else do I need to add to my piece? Maybe I'll add the wedding band, and that could be sort of the same as adding what you would do if you were adding a vein. So I'm going to roll out a really small coil here. And the band is probably going to be sort of a flat piece of metal. So I'm going to mimic that a little bit by use a tiny rolling pin here. I'm going to roll this out, and I might even cut edges so that it looks even more band-like. I'm going to flip that over, roll it out. I'm going to roll it out as thin as I can. One more thing I forgot to do, even in my demo here, is poke that hole in this negative space of the rose. I'm going to go right into the center and just poke a hole. That's all I need to do. Alright, so for the wedding band, I'm going to cut a strip on either side so I have a nice straight edge. I'm trying to mimic a band of gold or a band of silver, whatever. Make it pretty thin. Doesn't have to be thick. You know, we don't have to get into the gender stereotypes of what a wedding ring look like, but I did see these. Oh my gosh, this actually reminds me. I can't remember the brand, but I was looking through this magazine once and there were some advertisements for these like extremely artistic wedding rings, and they were giant like roses and succulents and flowers, and they had all these diamonds all over them, and they were just the most gaudy and beautiful thing I've ever seen as a ring before. So that's what this is. It's funny how your memory can kind of conjure up these things and you don't even realize you're doing it. Okay, so I'm gonna go in, I think it was like Louis Vuitton, or I don't know, some fancy fashion designer working on wedding rings. And I like the ones that look like succulents the most. I thought they were very unique. I've never seen a ring that looked like a succulent before. That was, you know, an expensive diamond ring. Probably cost, you know, $500,000 or something ridiculous like that. All right, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna carve away at this finger a little bit before I add the rings, because I don't want to go in there and try to carve around the ring. I'm trying to add the crease in my finger here first before I add the extra detail of the band. All right, I'm going to go in and just a delicate little score here. I might not put it right on the crease. You know, if you really look at the way a ring sits on your hand, you know, it sits in the crease, but you can still kind of see, you know, how does it look? What does it look like? Look at realistic things as reference. I promise you, in any visual arts, that's going to help. You don't have to necessarily make it look realistic, but if you look at a reference, sometimes that helps. All right, now I'm going to go in and don't need this giant piece here, but I'm going to score even the tiniest things like your veins and your little rings and your band-aids need scoring. And these are the things that actually need scoring the most because they're going to dry faster than the thickness of your heart, and they could pop right off very, very easily. Almost dipped my brush in my coffee. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of water with my paintbrush to both things. Get this scored back here. And then I'm going to very delicately stick this in there. I might even fold back the petal of that and get this really in the right spot. And I'm going to actually do more carving on this. Just adding the clay is not enough detail. This is step one. Add the wet clay. Add the form. Step two, let it dry a bit. Then step three is the carving, and the carving is really what makes it look refined and realistic. So now you can kind of see the wedding band on there. I might push it in a little bit with my tool just to make sure that those scored areas are nice and compressed. I'm not super happy with the way that's dipping in there. Like it looks like it's fabric and not metal. So I might work on that a little bit later. All right, and then later as this dries, I'm going to go in and I'm going to carve and scrape away even more on this band so it doesn't look so much like a cut piece of clay. It looks more like metal. All right, so that's all I can do for Ceramics 1 today. Next class I will start to carve in, but your goal really for the end of the weekend is to get all of your wet clay attached. All your arteries, all of your extra sculptural thematic things need to be attached, because next week I'm going to ask you to get your piece to a leather hard state so that you can start carving on it. And then we'll be done by the end of class next week. By the end of Thursday, we'll be done with your sculpture. So we are really rounding the bend on this, and we're getting close. So try your best to keep up with the steps. If you're behind, that's when you start to do this as homework. I don't really like to assign homework in this class, but if you're behind on your sculpture and it's due soon, you might want to work on it extra. Okay, Ceramics 2. I'm going to stop this video and